Okay, so the hay diet. Now the hay diet, sometimes known as the food combining diet. Okay, I've given you information on page 3 in your info book about hay diet because there's nothing in Nutrition for Dummies on hay diet. And basically this was about eating your carbs separately. And in other words, when you're eating is putting the food into their food groups. The idea being that you digested them better. Now, for some reason, someone did do some scientific work on this, and it shows you that sometimes people do. And they actually found that it didn't actually matter if you had your proteins mixed with your carbs. It didn't actually inhibit the digestion in any way. However, when I was in practice, I dealt with a lot of people with chronic fatigue and that sort of thing, and I did find that people who did eat like that, it was actually easier on their system. It's almost like what little prana they had in their system actually coped better if they ate hay-wise. And in fact, if you go to France, you'll have your meat course served up separately from and Italy. Yeah. So it's interesting that the so-called Mediterranean diet that they go on, they don't point this out. Is that's often how that's eaten. So for all their thing about the hay diet not having a scientific basis, there does seem to be there's obviously a cultural stuff going on because the French, I mean, it's one of the reasons we sit down and have a 7-hour meal in France, certainly in the evening, is that everything gets served up separately. And if you look how, I mean, Si always says to me, I love having meat with fruit. You know, ham and melon, for me, a starter. And actually, that works, but then it suits my blood type, it suits my whatever. But you can see how for some people mixing those two things wouldn't work. Yeah, but you're with me. You know, it's like having pizza with ham and pineapple on. You know, but so it's one of these things that they do. Some of the traditional cultures are known for their good food, like the Italians and the French. You do actually find some of these traditions going on that the meat is served separately from the veg and whatever. So, you know, maybe hay wasn't actually so far off the mark. And certainly, I've personally found that if people's immune systems are a little bit under stress, that sometimes that actually helps them.
That's a question, a general question. So, would you define the purpose of a diet there?
Well, a diet is just an eating regime, isn't it? Yeah, well, that's the point. Is that when people it's a wordage use, isn't it? When people say, "Oh, I'm on a diet," we tend to automatically think that they're on "I want to lose weight" diet. Yeah. But actually, diet is just what's described as the general what you are eating diet. Right. You know, so you can have a junk food diet. You know, we can have raw food.
So the word diet doesn't define what the purpose of the diet is?
No, it's just what describes the regime that you are actually... But I think it's come to mean something different in certain circumstances.
Right.
It's just a way of...
We associate diet with trying to lose weight.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to.
Dieting, yeah. Okay. Whereas in fact we're all dieting all the time because we're eating. You know, and it's just we're eating our thing, whatever our thing happens to be.
Our culture tends to think that a diet is good all around, whereas a diet could be great for losing weight, but rubbish for your health.
Exactly. Yeah, and could be theoretically brilliant for your, you know, on paper brilliant for your health, but actually might not suit you.
Yeah.
So hay diet, like I said, there's actually something to be said for that. And this sort of comes in fats, if you like. So, for example, on the top here, Atkins diet. All right. So this was basically no obvious carbs. This was protein and veg. Now I tried that because it suits my blood group down to the ground. And actually, I actually did lose quite a lot of weight. And a lot of people, whatever you're doing, if you're trying to actually cut down or change your food, you will often lose weight in the first few weeks anyway because your body loses water. But it's what happens after that. Because one of the problems with the Atkins diet is what happens after that is that the incomplete digestion of sugars, people get ketonic. So, like happens with diabetics. You actually start breathing out and like pear drops. The incomplete digestion. And I used to find as well as it did irritate the bladder. So there's obviously quite a lot because the protein, the kidneys have got to actually process. It's actually too strong. But it wasn't a big deal. It was expensive. Because it's like you're reliant on protein. But I think a lot of people found it useful, but it was like Ariana was saying earlier, the trouble is when you go onto something specific like that, is that what happens when you come off it? And this is the whole thing about any diet. It's like you find why you're doing it, but what's going to happen when you come off it? I mean, it comes down to the bottom line is when people talk about their diet, whatever their diet is, it's got to be something you've got to be able to maintain effortlessly or relatively effortlessly. If you've got to pay more, and you think about slim fast type stuff as well. If you've got to pay more, you may be limited by how long you could do it anyway. And is it something that you can actually maintain and enjoy things? And the answer is if you're restricting things away, actually probably not.
Especially if it affects you socially and things like that as well. I remember my sister used to go out for lunch a lot with her friends, partly why she put on all the weight. And she was on slim fast, and she'd just sit there and she'd slice up her little bar and have a bite with each course that everybody else was eating.
But then again, slim fast also, it's I can buy a solution.
Yes. And to some extent, Atkins is the same. You can buy a solution.
They did offer actual counselling as well. My sister said, I don't need that.
I think the thing now with how, for example, Weight Watchers and Slimmers World work now, because they're a lot different than they were in the past, they are actually realise that you actually have to educate people to change the whole of the way that they look at their food. And this will come up again and again is like if you have to diet to lose weight, or you have to diet because you're suffering from a specific physical problem, it's got to be something that's easily maintained. And also where, if you're looking at the emotional state of the person, is they're not feeling that they're missing out. Because, if we're going to be holistic in the way we look at, we're not just looking at the physical body, we're looking at the emotional state, and we're looking at the mental state of somebody. And if they feel that they're being inhibited or they're being restricted, resentment's going to build up. So you've got to, it's like if you're helping somebody change the way they're eating, you have to bear in mind that you can't just go, like, by the book, okay, well, you've got to do this. Because the person's still got to feel that they've got a life worth living. Because otherwise all you're doing is you're setting up the same old thing that Slim Fast do. Fine while they're doing it, but what's going to happen afterwards?
So really, in that case, just small changes are the way to...
And small changes that can be maintained, and that can be maintained physically, as in financially, and also that small changes that are therefore easier to adapt to emotionally and mentally. And also, you've got to also build into it that what happens if they go and eat out. And I must admit that's one thing that the QCF unit is actually quite good at. It does actually say, then how do you eat healthily when you're out? what choices do you think will be available to you?
Well, I come across that hugely as a vegetarian. I'm not vegetarian at the moment. I do eat fish occasionally, but go to a pub and it's
cheese
so boring, and it's always cheese or goat's cheese. Always goat's cheese. I hate goat's cheese, but anyway.
But to a non-vegetarian, that sounds exotic.
If you like goat's cheese.
Well, I don't like goat's cheese.
Yeah,
But do you know what I mean? It's like vegetarian options.
And they're saying, we'll give you nice wild mushrooms.
But that sounds exotic too as well.
No, it's just bloody mushrooms. I don't like mushrooms. They don't like me.
Yeah, but it's like it's that sort of thing to bear in mind.
Yeah.
And also, depending on why the person's on a diet, it's the difference if someone's gone on is dieting out of choice.
Yeah.
But if they're dieting out of the fact that they have to because they're diabetic or they've got gallbladder problems, they've got diverticulitis, they're celiac, anything like that, then how they eat out becomes quite crucial. They can't just think, well, I'm not going to take any notice of my diet today.
Yeah, because they can be really ill.
Exactly. So, I mean, for people who are on a diet of choice, they can usually think, I won't worry about today. I'll eat what I need to eat today, and I'll sort myself out later in the week. But if they're on a diet because they have to be on a very specific one, then that's when, it's part of what you have to talk through with people is what happens if you go down the pub. What choices are you actually going to have? Are you going to have to take a little box with your food in it? And of course the trouble with that is emotionally, especially if in a group, it's awful.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, you might have a sort of an egotistical streak who comes in and thinks, oh yes, I'm being very good. But behind that there is the hurtness of not being able to join in.
Yeah.
So it's all that stuff has got to come into it, and it comes into it anyway. Even if you're trying yourself to change the way you eat, you've got to have that flexibility.
I guess that's why things like the raw foodie thing and the vegan thing, people build up a sort of community around themselves.
Yeah. So they've got a social life.
All the social stuff goes on together with those people who are eating the same.
Yes, that's right.
Otherwise, it's impossible.
It's very, very difficult. I mean, even though nowadays restaurants and hotels are much more aware of adapting to people's dietary requirements.
Gluten-free is coming
in.
It's much better.
Now.
It's much more catered for.
That's right, and much